Hey everyone, it's Barbara and Tim, and we are at Grace Lawn Cemetery in Van Buren, Arkansas. And we're going to tell you a story today about Ruie Ann Park. And Ruie Ann was murdered by her adopted daughter. And so there's her stone. And I'm going to read you a little bit about Ruie Ann. She was a member of a pioneer Arkansas family. She was a retired school teacher, a noted historian, a former co-owner of the Van Buren Press Argus. She was a lifelong member of the First United Methodist Church of Van Buren. She was a founder of the Van Buren Garden Club and the Crawford County Historical Association, and a member of the Van Buren Historic District Commission, the Women's Literary Guild, the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, and so on and so on. So you get the idea about Ruthie Ann Smith. And so then Ruthie Ann and her husband had Sam Hugh Park, and Tim is showing you Sam's stone, and I'll tell you a little bit about him. Sam Hugh Park, he was born to the late Hugh and Ruie Ann Park of Van Buren. He died of liver failure in a Fort Smith hospital. He was in private practice as a Van Buren attorney at the time of his death. He was a former assistant United States attorney, former attorney for the Crawford County Democratic Committee, and a former employee of the Maritime Commission of Washington, D.C. So this is about Ruie Ann and her son Hugh. And when Hugh was about 5 years old, the Parks adopted a little girl, and her
But
name
they had
was.
had an infant daughter, right?
Yes, it looks like they had an infant daughter that they had lost. Looks like 10 years before they had Sam.
And
And so they adopted Linda. And Linda was 7 years old when they adopted her. And Linda and Sam were very different. Sam was, he excelled in everything he did. He was very smart. He was the head of his class. He, he, I mean, anything he did, he was at the top. He was the number one. He was the winner. Everything that he did, everything he put his hand to, he was just very outgoing. Made good grades. It came easy for him. And Linda was just the opposite. Linda was very shy. She struggled in school, but she did go on to get a teaching degree. She, Linda was just awkward around people, and Ruie Ann but Ruie Ann would dress her in these beautiful little dresses and put these big hair bows in her hair and prance her around town. And her attitude was kind of like, "Look at me! Look what I did! Went to the orphanage and got this poor little girl, and look at these pretty dresses I bought for her, and these beautiful hair bows and ribbons she has now, and this poor little girl this and this poor little," and she kept comparing Linda to Sam Hugh. Sam Hugh was the apple of his mother's eye, and they Sam and Linda were just the opposite of each other. And Ruie Ann made sure that everybody knew that they were doing Linda a favor for adopting her and taking her in, and she would make remarks like, "You're not really a park. You're just you're not one of us." And people around town noticed. The people around town saw how just for show. This adoption was more or less for show. And so Linda graduates from college, gets a teaching degree, marries an attorney, and moves to Cabot, Arkansas. His name is Howard Martin, and they have a couple of little boys. And then Linda realizes that finds out that her husband is having an affair. Well, she is just devastated. And I mean, she's been beat down her whole life anyway. And her husband's no different. He's very abusive, very controlling. He does things like check the mileage on the car to make sure she didn't go anywhere. He picked out all of her clothes. He was a very controlling person. And then he's done with her. And he's having an affair. She's devastated. So he and one of the older boys go on like a Boy Scout camping trip, and Linda's at home with the younger boy, and she finds out all this. She's upset, so she decides she's going to come to Van Buren and see her mother. She just needs some comfort and someone to put their arms around her and say, you know, that it's going to be okay. Things happen, but this is, you're going to get through this. So she drives to Van Buren. She goes into the house. It's like maybe 11 o'clock at night. Her mother's getting ready for bed, and her mother is just totally opposite from what Linda needed. Instead, she starts belittling her. She Ruie Ann starts saying, and now you've got these little boys. They're going to grow up stupid. They're just like you, and of course he's found somebody else because more or less you're worthless, and who would want to stay with you, and you need to just go home and do whatever it takes to take care of your husband, and because you're not coming up here and staying, and it's late and she's got the baby in the car, and so Ruie Ann says, I guess you're going to want to spend the night. I'll have to go make the bed now, and I'm not prepared for visitors. And Linda said, no, we'll go home. And she said, well, that's stupid. You're always making stupid decisions. Now you're going to use the gas to drive all the way back, and you drove all the way up here. And so Linda goes to the restroom. She's crying. She's trying to wash her face. She goes back out, and she sees a gavel that was on a plaque that, of course, Sam Hugh had a plaque, and it had a gavel on it, and the gavel had come loose and was laying beside the plaque. She picks up the plaque and goes into the bedroom where her mother's in there making the bed and complaining that she's being put out because Linda and the babies come up, and she just snaps, and she hits her, I believe it's 10 times in the head.
Yeah, they said
Kill,
at least 10 times.
Killing her mother. And then for some reason, and I don't know why she would do this, but it doesn't even matter, she would drag her from the bedroom into the living room. So there's like blood through the house. Um, she leaves, decides, well, what do I do now? So I've got to go home. I've just got to get back to Cabot. So she leaves, um, gets in the car, drives home. She throws the gavel out somewhere around Mulberry. And so the next morning, Sam Hugh gets up, and his mother is, the newspaper is, I'm going to get my water, y'all. My mouth is getting really dry out here in this air. So the water. Okay, let me see if I can get Tim to take his phone. There we go. I'm going to get a drink, and then we'll continue. And so, anyway, I don't even know where I was.
Sam.
Oh, the next morning, Sam gets up and he notices, because he lives next door to his mother, he notices that her newspaper's not been picked up, and it's like 11 o'clock. Well, let me go into a little more detail about Sam. He gets up at 11 o'clock because he parties all night. He has a reputation in town of being a drunk. He's an attorney, but he does drugs, he does alcohol. He's known in town for going and bailing young men out of jail and taking them home and letting them work off their debt. And the police don't really care for him at all because they know what he's up to. He parties all the time. He made good money as an attorney, but he's blown all of his money. He was hurt a couple of days before his mother's murder, arguing with her over money, and that was pretty much the only thing he and his mother argued about. He was the apple of her eye. She thought he was, the sunset on Sam Hugh, and he lives next door. He sees the newspaper, so he thinks that is really strange because my mother is an early riser. So he goes and gets the newspaper. He's going to take it into his mother. And he walks through the door and he sees blood everywhere. And then he sees his mother's lifeless body. Well, he calls the police, and the police come, and they're interrogating him and a young man that's living in his house at this time. There's different young men that live there at different times. And the police, they pretty much suspect Sam Hugh right from the beginning. We can walk around and look at some of the stones and read some of the stones while I'm telling the story. And so I'll just follow you. And so the police suspect Sam Hugh. That's their number one suspect. Well, Sam Hugh, he has a drinking problem. Do you
But
have something to
but
say?
you said, like you said, they had that everybody knew that they were having arguments, and it was always over money because of his uh,
Yeah, that
party
was
and his
about the only thing
lifestyle.
that he and his mother, from what I can tell from my research, the only thing they really
And so
got into. You know what? His dad
he
is up here.
became.
We can walk up here and look at the
We'll
at
try
his
to go up
dad's.
here.
So, yeah, it had been a couple of days before they heard. People had overheard them arguing over money, but that's pretty much the only thing that he did. I think that Ruie Ann didn't care for was the way he was going through the money.
Yeah.
But all the other crazy stuff that Sam Hughes did, that was the thing that bothered her the most. So anyway,
The police came out.
the police came out and they're interrogating him. He calls Linda, tells her to come, and Linda tells her, and her husband, and she's all upset. So I don't know. It's like they couldn't. Seems like to me she wasn't remembering everything all the time in the story because she's folding clothes and it's like everything's okay. And her husband, she tells her husband, she gets a phone call. Sam Hugh calls and says someone's killed mother. She tells Howard, her husband, he's back from camping now. She tells him, she said, we've got to go to Van Buren. So they start packing things. She does get upset. She tells Howard, I feel like I'm going to throw up, and can you go get me a Coke? And so anyway, they put clothes in the suitcases and get a sitter for the kids, and they drive to Van Buren, and the police are everywhere. And she goes over and talks to Sam Hugh, and he says, Linda, they think it's me. They think that I'm the one that did it. And so for 2 years, he is their
Primary suspect. Yeah,
for
their
two
only
years.
suspect.
Yes, for 2 years, it's like they had tunnel vision, the police, and they just decided.
But there were so many of the police that didn't agree with his lifestyle.
Yes, he had a bad reputation in town,
and she had locks on her doors where she kept those locks always, and everybody knew it. And the only three people that had keys was Ruie Ann, her son, and her daughter Linda.
Yes. And so,
and there was no forced entry.
There was no forced entry, so
there was no theft. There was none of that. It was just a murder.
Yes. And the reason they think it's either Sam Hugh, or they think that it's either Sam Hugh or maybe one of the guys that he takes in. Because they were always doing drugs and stuff, and so they're thinking.
But Sam was still the
primary suspect. Yes. And so anyway, I'm trying to stay on track with cars coming by, and I want to try to keep them out of the video because they probably don't want to be on the video.
But
they didn't know we were going to be doing a video when they came.
But Sam's drinking intensified even when they started really investigating him as a primary suspect. He had lost his mother, but he already had an alcohol problem, and then it intensified after his mother was murdered. And so for 2 years he was the primary suspect, and they were trying to find the evidence to really, the smoking gun, to really put him behind bars for the murder. But they couldn't find that evidence, the hard evidence that they needed. All they had was speculation.
Okay, and so Howard, Linda's husband, it's one of these stones right in here somewhere. Howard, but there's people coming in there probably going to honor their family, so we'll just move on and do that later and walk on. Yeah, let's go, babe. Just we can come back and
So go ahead with
it's right in
Sam.
here, y'all. I'm thinking that we'll just go ahead and walk back down to the other end and let these people have this area, the cemetery. They're bringing flowers for their loved one, and we don't want to get in the way. But I know it was right in here somewhere. I just hate to be here anyway. So Howard had figured out um, that Linda, because he would check the mileage on the car. He would check the mileage on the car and find out if she was going anywhere. She's driving, but she's not supposed to drive the car. I mean, he was very controlling. He'd pick out her clothes. He would, um, tell her what she could do and what she couldn't do. And when he said jump, she jumped. And that's the way she was with her mother. That's the way she was her whole life. She had been beat down. And so he had looked at the mileage and figured out that Linda went somewhere. And not only did she go somewhere, but she drove a lot of miles. I mean, all the way from Cabot, Arkansas to Van Buren, Arkansas. That's probably a 4-hour drive, maybe, I'm thinking, one way. And so he confronted her, and for months he pressed her and pressed her like an attorney would, because he's an attorney, and pushed her and pushed her and pressed her and pressed her until finally she confessed to killing her mother. Well, he tells her to keep her mouth shut and not to say a word and not to come to Van Buren unless he's with her, because if the word gets out, no one is going to want to hire an attorney whose ex-wife has killed her mother. And we're going to have to go because there's more people coming. I think there's something going on in this part of the cemetery, and we need to get back down here out of their way. I don't want to get too far from you because I'll lose my microphone. Yeah, if I get walk too far away from you, I'll lose my microphone. So I need you to get up here closer to me. And so, anyway, I have a lot of distractions here, y'all. I am so sorry. And so, Howard, Linda's husband, figures it out that Linda is the murderer, and he presses her, tells her to keep her mouth shut. Nobody's going to want to hire an attorney who's married to a woman that killed her mother. And in the meantime, Sam Hughes in the hospital, dying of liver failure. It takes after 2 years, he's still the number one suspect. Um, when he does die 2 years later after his mother, then everything's going fine. And then Linda's husband so in the divorce from when Linda and her husband got a divorce, he's an attorney, and he takes a house. She gets the very bare minimum of everything. He takes the two older children. Now they have two smaller children, or maybe one smaller child. Maybe they just had three boys. And he takes the two older ones, leaves her with the baby, leaves her with very little money. She has to go,
But then he started living a pretty extravagant lifestyle with his new
with his girlfriend. Yes,
girlfriend, and so he was
spending
spending a lot of money, but bought her an engagement ring, very expensive. And so what she decided that she wanted more money because she wasn't getting enough money. She was living in the paycheck to paycheck, or not making ends meet, but her ex-husband was doing really well, and
buying
so
big diamond rings and
yeah,
traveling around the world. And
so she wanted to take him back to court and get the child support raised and
Maybe
make him pay
alimony, whatever she is
more
getting.
money. And that's when he decided to release the information.
Yes. And so he sets her up in his office and has a recorder on, and he starts drilling her on the murder of her mother again until she breaks and just starts confessing everything. This time it's on tape. And then he calls the Van Buren Police Department and he tells them that he has the tape and her confession. And they come that day and they arrest her, put her in jail.
Yeah, they hauled her back to Fort Smith. Where was she at? Still in Cabot?
In Cabot, yes.
And they brought her all the way back to Fort Smith, Sebastian County.
She was so
Or Crawford County,
distraught.
that's what it is. Crawford County,
They
I'm
put
sorry.
She was so distraught they put her in the hospital for 30 days on suicide watch. And so anyway, she gets 20 years.
Yeah, she openly admitted to
Yes, she
everything.
confessed that day when the
She
police came.
confessed
She
to the
confessed
whole
to them.
thing
Yes.
of what she did to her mother.
And so she gets 20 years in prison. She gets out in 4, y'all, and
Paroled, yeah.
paroled in 4 years. And um, there's a book called Blind Rage that I've read 2 or 3 times. And I'm just trying to go back from memory, but I did read it 2 or 3 times, so you'd think I would remember a lot more than this. But it seems like to me there were petitions in Cabot and in Van Buren of people telling how good of a person she was, how bad her husband treated her, how bad her mother treated her. People here in Van Buren, even people that her mother went to church with, was siding with Linda. Not that it was the right thing or okay to murder anybody, because it's not, but that they had witnessed her whole childhood where she was beat down. I mean, just
And
verbally.
that's where they came about, the Blind Rage.
Blind Rage. That's where the title of the book, Blind Rage, comes from, is because she just snapped. She snapped. Her husband had beat her down all these years. Her mother beat her down her
And
whole
a
life.
true example of a temporary
Insanity.
insanity of that she just absolutely snapped. She had nobody to turn to, and in that moment when she was turning to the only thing that she had, which was her mother that had adopted her, seemed to fail her at the time when she needed someone the most, and she snapped, and she took that gavel and killed her mother, and then just absolutely probably did. It was, you don't know what was going through her mind, but it happened.
And people in Van Buren said that Ruie Ann's Park wasn't really a nice person to anybody. She always tried to put on like she was all that. She was just
But
more
this
more than
happened
she
in
really was.
1981, and May the 17th, 1981 is when she was murdered, and that's really not that long ago.
And
40, what is that, 43 years ago?
even Sam Hughes' best friend signed the petition for Linda to get out of to be paroled early. Sunday school uh, people that Ruie Ann, some of her friends through the years, signed the petition for Linda to be released, and also in Cabot, people that she went to that knew her and Howard and how he had treated her through the years were signing a petition for her early release. But anyway, so that is our story, and I'm so sorry about the interruptions. I had hoped that we would walk up and look at her dad's stone, which her parents, Ruie Ann and Hugh Park, had divorced while Sam and Linda were still in high school. But still, that was her dad, and we were going to go up and look at that. But there's people that started gathering, and I think that they're, going to maybe clean a grave for their loved ones or put flowers. And so, anyway, sorry for the interruptions, and the distractions. And thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.